postnatal depression in women, but why is no one talking about the fact that men suffer from it too? Research shows that men experience postnatal depression just as much as women, only their symptoms are different. It's today's Daily Dilemma. Dads get postnatal depression as well, so why isn't it talked about? Dr. Justin Coulson from Kidspot joins us now to chat about it.
Good morning. Welcome back.
Just as much? Wow, that's extraordinary.
Well, it depends on which data you look at. There are certainly some suggestions that it's not nearly to the same level, and others suggest it could be as much as 10% of men, about 3 to 6 months after bub comes along, start to show all of the same signs of depression that women get postnatally as well.
Like
and
what?
so there is a thing called PND for dads. It'll usually involve the typical aspects or variables that we see in depression. So they'll become a lot more withdrawn. They won't want to get out of bed. They'll have no energy. They won't want to be involved with family or friends. They may not be sleeping, or they may be sleeping too much. Loss of appetite, or perhaps an increased appetite. All the same sorts of things that people experience when they're experiencing depression. It's just that it hits dads and it hits them postnatally.
Did it affect you?
No, I've got 6 and I've been full of...
6?
Yeah. And
You're addicted.
I've been full of joy and beans every time. It's been wonderful for me.
That doesn't make you depressed, I don't know.
Oh, exactly.
It is hard though, isn't it? Because, I mean, I think it's very difficult for women to own up to having postnatal depression and getting help. I imagine it's even harder for blokes to do that, isn't it?
It is, and traditionally men have always shied away from telling anybody that they're depressed anyway. So when we say that it could be 1 in 10 or 1 in 20, we really don't know. They're just estimates based on the guys that are actually saying, I'm feeling really lousy, I'm not getting through this. It's only been since the baby came along. And we're starting to see that there's a real pattern here.
And is it also, because you mentioned one of the big drivers for it is alcohol or substance use or abuse,
Right.
which, and don't get me wrong, you know, I love a
Not
drink.
wrong with that,
There's
mate.
nothing wrong with that at all. But you know, obviously, if you are abusing or having an unhealthy amount of alcohol or drugs or whatever, that is not going to make you a very happy person. Are we sort of medicalising something as a mental issue when really you just should be
Stay off the drugs.
stay off the drugs?
Well, look, that's a risk factor, but not everyone who drinks, even people who drink perhaps to excess, is going to end up with PND because they've ended up with a son or a daughter. There's a number of other risk factors that we need to consider as well. I think that one of the key risk factors, and I know that this counts for everyone, but if you've got a baby who's not sleeping, a baby who's really irritable, a baby who's constantly needy, that's a risk factor. And I know that sounds like...
Family history as well?
Family history and
issues?
personal history, but also the history of your spouse or partner. So men who might have otherwise been okay, if their wife ends up suffering from depression, they end up carrying a lot more stress, a lot more burden. It's a lot heavier for them, and they can often, I guess, catch it, for want of a better word.
And the other thing is, of course, when you do have a newborn baby, you are tired all the time, and it is really hard. So how do you tell? That's right. How do you tell the difference between
Doesn't improve.
You know, you don't
better.
have postnatal depression.
Going.
You're just
Down,
a bit
down.
flat because you're tired and you're drinking too much or whatever, and just fix those things rather than. I'm always cautious. I know there are very real cases, but I'm always cautious when we medicalise what are normal things, because people think, well, there's something wrong with me, when really it's perfectly natural.
That's right. If I'm just tired, the difference between experiencing a depressive episode and being tired is that the depression is ongoing. It doesn't disappear. In fact, as time goes on, it gets worse, and pretty soon you get to a point where you cease functioning even at that suboptimal level that you do when you're exhausted and you're stressed and you're tired and you're pressured. And so it just gets worse and worse. And unfortunately, we see this having significant impacts, not just on mum and dad, but particularly on the children, and the impact on kids is really quite devastating.
And it's best to go and see a psychiatrist who can properly diagnose
See
and
a
maybe
GP
put
first
you
and then
on
a psychologist.
That's right. All right. Thank you very much for that, Dr. Justin Coulson. We appreciate it.